So I'll try to touch on some other issues. First of all, I think what we're seeing is a reflection of the American decision to scale down its role as superpower in the Middle East. Maybe they want to maintain their role as a superpower elsewhere, but here in the Middle East, there's clearly a policy, a strategy of scaling down the role of a superpower. And we see it in Afghanistan, we see it also in the context of Iran. The insistence, the eagerness to rejoin the JCPOA is another reflection of the need of the United States, according to this new strategy, to cut deals with the radical Islamist groups, whether it is in Afghanistan or in Iran, and in a hope that they will take care of the ultra-radical, like Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State, and refrain from taking steps that threaten the security of the West, like giving up the idea of having a nuclear arsenal. Of course, this is not going to work. And what we're seeing right away is how the entire axis of radical Islamists in the Middle East react to the American, what they consider to be a defeat, and it's not totally untrue. It's the radicals in Gaza are spreading sweets all over the place, and the people in Hamas celebrate Taliban's victory, and the people of Al-Qaeda in Syria are celebrating. That was to be expected, and it is what's happening. And as Colonel Kemp said, this might be in the future also translated into more actions against Western targets in the Middle East and beyond, in the West as well. So we have to be very concerned about that. Second thing that I'm worried about is what lessons can we learn from that about the ability of the West to understand the societies, the Muslim societies. It's the way the government has collapsed tells you a lot about how unsuccessful this experiment in bringing liberalism to Muslim society was in the case of Afghanistan, and maybe elsewhere as well. We saw what happened and what's happening still in other places like Iraq. So it's a very problematic situation when you see how the American intelligence, how the American decision makers couldn't understand the facts on the ground in those places, and it was also manifested in the surprise, the total surprise of the rapid way in which this collapse took place. I mean, President Biden and Secretary Blinken were speaking shortly before it all happened and promised that nothing like that can happen. Definitely, it cannot happen from Friday to Monday, and they have 300,000 troops and so on and so forth. And the reality was so different that it is embarrassing for the West that the leadership of the West is actually is not in any way in a position of understanding what's going on in these places, and that's a very frustrating thing for everybody who places its security on cooperation and relying on the West in general and on the United States in particular. And that's the only thing that stands on the other position, on the other side, is that the forces of radicalism in the Middle East are suffering as well. Iran is in a very poor situation as well. So is Lebanon, so is Syria, so is Yemen, so is Iraq. All these places where the Iranians are having the upper hand are suffering terribly, and the more pragmatic states are doing better. So it's still sort of balancing the negative impact of what's going on, but still the negative impact is pretty much felt all over the Middle East. Looking at it from an Israeli point of view, I would add two more lessons learned. First, even though the United States, of course, are a major ally and we have to keep cooperating with it and coordinating with it and work together, we have to understand the limits of the superpowers, especially when it comes to the Western superpowers. And that's why we should keep saying to ourselves that we have to be able to, and not only saying, do whatever is necessary in order to make sure that we can defend ourselves by ourselves. We can cooperate with the Americans, we can coordinate with the Americans, we can work together on power build-up and force build-up and things like that. But in the end of the day, we have to be able to protect ourselves by ourselves. And I refer particularly into the issue that is so contested, and this is the Iranian issue. We have to be able to take care of this problem by ourselves, because if the Americans cannot get the commitment to protect Afghanistan, which in a place where they were having very limited amount of casualties in the last 7 years. It's not that they were bleeding. They were not bleeding at all. If they are leaving Afghanistan just because they don't want to pay any price, will they take Iran on when Iran poses a critical threat? And therefore, we have to be ready to do it by ourselves when the time comes that such an activity is necessary. And we saw just in the last couple of weeks that the Americans were saying, and the G7 were saying, that the attack on the Mercer Street ship in the Gulf of Oman was terrible, and there should be retaliated upon, and so on and so forth, and nothing happened. And we saw that the European Union is sending a representative to participate in the inauguration of President Raisi. So it's clear that you cannot build on these people to take action when necessary against threats coming from other Islamist radicals like the Iranians, just like they did in Afghanistan. And secondly, it's also true in the context of the Palestinians. We have to be able to protect ourselves by ourselves and retain the control of the territories that are critical for our security, and not build on any foreign forces that will come, like it was suggested in the plan of President Obama and General Allen at the time, that foreign forces like American forces, NATO forces will come and take responsibility for our security. That's a clear lesson from Afghanistan, is that you should never even think about something like that. And the second thing that comes to mind in view of what's happening right now is that for the more pragmatic and moderate forces in the Middle East, and there are many of them, who cannot stand by themselves, they need somebody to help them stand straight. They are too weak. They need somebody to help them in these testing times. That for them, relying on the United States becomes so problematic today. But there is another element, another player in the Middle East that is not going to leave, that is going to stay the course. And this is Israel. And Israel is capable to provide some assistance and some spine that is so necessary in times like that. And we saw that the Abraham Accord managed to survive some challenges already. And I hope that now more people will understand that the way to go is to stick to the Israelis. And we have an opportunity here, especially as Iran and its partners are so weak and suffering so much, that the alternative to standing with the US is not necessarily going to Iran, but going in the direction of Israel. And I hope this is going to be well played by the Israeli government and taken advantage of in order to strengthen and to widen the Abraham Accord, maybe with the support of the Americans, who need now a strong Israel. And you can see now that strong Israel is there in their benefit, because Israel, unlike Afghanistan, doesn't need Americans fighting for its stability and security.